There's a chemical in your bread that's also used to make yoga mats. Europe banned it. Singapore will imprison you for using it. In America, it's in your sandwich right now. And it's not the only one. America is the richest country on earth, yet somehow also one of the sickest. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune disorders. Every year, more diagnoses, more prescriptions, shorter lives. 90% of our medical costs now go towards treating chronic diseases. Obesity has tripled since the 1960s. Life expectancy, the measure every nation wants to see rise, has begun to fall. Something is deeply wrong with the food on our plates. The average American diet is over 60% ultra-processed. Made not by farmers, but by corporations. What we eat is filled with dyes, preservatives, and chemicals banned in dozens of other countries. Additives linked to cancer, hormonal disruption, and DNA damage still line our grocery store shelves. Europe bans first and asks questions later. America asks questions only after the damage is done. We've been told it's all about personal choice. But the truth is more complicated, because behind every label, there's a lobbying group. Behind every safe ingredient, there's a loophole. And behind every rising disease rate, there's a system that profits from keeping you sick. This isn't about calories or carbs. It's about control. A story of science, money, and manipulation hidden in plain sight. And it starts with a decision made in 1958, a loophole that changed everything. Let's decode it. Welcome to Decoding the Darkness. After World War II, America's food culture changed forever. What families once grew, harvested, or bought fresh from local farms started coming from distant factories. TV dinners, frozen meals, instant everything. The message was clear. Convenience is progress. But convenience came with a cost, not measured in dollars, but in ingredients most people couldn't pronounce. Synthetic dyes made cereals brighter. Preservatives kept bread soft for weeks. Chemical emulsifiers stopped sauces from separating. Dough conditioners made mass production possible. None of these additives were added for nutrition. They were added for profit. Cheap ingredients plus long shelf life equals higher margins. Simple math for corporations, complex consequences for bodies. And while American grocery shelves filled with these new innovations, something different was happening overseas. Europe started banning them. Potassium bromate, a dough strengthener that makes bread fluffier and production faster. Studies in lab animals linked it to cancer. The EU banned it, so did Canada, China, and dozens of others. The US? The FDA only encouraged companies to stop using it voluntarily. Many didn't. Titanium dioxide, a whitening agent that makes candy brighter, frosting whiter, sauces creamier. In 2022, the EU banned it from food after studies showed possible DNA damage and inflammation at the cellular level. American Skittles still contained it until recently, when Mars quietly reformulated under public pressure. Brominated vegetable oil, used to keep citrus flavoring suspended in sodas and sports drinks. Bromine can build up in the body, affecting the thyroid and nervous system. Europe banned it years ago. You can still find it in American beverages. But these aren't accidents, and they're not oversights, because there's a reason the FDA keeps approving what other countries ban, and that reason has a dollar amount attached to it. The pattern is consistent. Other nations use the precautionary principle. If harm is suspected, ban it until proven safe. America does the opposite. Allow it until harm is undeniable. And here's where it gets personal. A mother in California noticed her son's behavior. Hyperactivity, trouble focusing, emotional swings seemed to spike after certain meals. On a hunch, she cut every product with artificial dyes. 2 weeks later, his teacher saw a difference. A month later, he was a different child. She wasn't a scientist, She was just paying attention. As these chemicals saturated the American food supply, chronic disease rates exploded. Cancer, diabetes, autoimmune disorders, obesity, heart disease. The timeline matches too perfectly to ignore. The FDA has a loophole that makes all this possible. GRAS, generally recognized as safe. It sounds official. It sounds protective. But here's how it really works. Companies can self-declare ingredients as GRAS without full FDA review. They submit their own safety studies, often funded by the same corporations profiting from approval, and the ingredient gets a green light. No long-term testing, no cumulative effect studies, no independent verification. The system is designed to approve, not to protect. And the architects of that system? You know their names. You see their logos every time you walk into a grocery store. So the question becomes unavoidable. Who really benefits when a nation built on convenience becomes a nation built on sickness? Follow the money and the pattern becomes clear. The ultra-processed food industry has spent over $1.15 billion on lobbying in recent years, more than tobacco, alcohol, and gambling combined. What did they buy with that money? Influence. Entire organizations exist for one purpose: shaping food policy. The Sugar Association funds studies that minimize sugar's health risk. The American Beverage Association fights every attempt to regulate sugary drinks. The Grocery Manufacturers Association speaks for nearly every processed food brand on the shelf. Their goal isn't complicated. Keep profitable ingredients legal, keep regulations weak, keep the public uncertain about what's safe. And they've been remarkably successful. The GRAS loophole, the generally recognized as safe rule, isn't an oversight. It's the product of lobbying, a system where companies approve their own chemicals while regulators look the other way. So who benefits from a nation built on sickness? The answer is sitting in plain sight. The same people who engineered it. But the influence runs deeper. It's built into the career paths of the people in charge. A food industry executive leaves Kraft Heinz or Nestle and joins the FDA or USDA. They help write the very regulations that will later govern their former employers. After a few years, they return to the private sector, sometimes to the same company, with the insider knowledge and powerful connections. It's called the revolving door, and it's not theory. You can trace it on LinkedIn. The result? Predictable. Rules that protect industry over people. Scientific research follows the same path. When food corporations fund a study, their products almost always come out looking safe. Independent research, funded by universities or public health groups, often find the opposite. One analysis of nutrition studies showed that industry-sponsored research was significantly more likely to reach conclusions favorable to its funder. Not because scientists are corrupt, but because funding shapes the questions asked, the data emphasized, and the results published. Profit is protected at every level. Big food profits from addictive, cheap products. Big Pharma profits from treating the diseases those products cause. It's a closed loop, a machine that feeds on illness and dependency. And the cost? Billions poured into treating diseases that could have been prevented. Conditions that research increasingly links back to what we eat. But the system can crack when pressure becomes undeniable. When consumers realize they have power, corporations respond, not out of principle, but out of profit. That moment exposes an uncomfortable truth. This isn't a broken system stumbled toward reform. It's a system working exactly as designed, just not for you. But the design goes deeper than lobbying and regulation, because once they control what you eat, they discover they can control something far more valuable, what you crave. And now the real question emerges. What happens when an entire population realizes they've been the product, not the customer? There's a reason you can't stop at one chip. A reason the craving comes back an hour after eating. A reason just one more somehow becomes the whole bag. It's not about willpower, it's about engineering. Ultra-processed foods are designed in laboratories to hijack your brain's reward system. Scientists working for food corporations have one job: find the exact combination of sugar, salt, and fat that triggers maximum craving with minimum satisfaction. They call it the bliss point, the perfect ratio that lights up your brain's dopamine pathways, the same neural circuits activated by addictive drugs. It's the formula that keeps you reaching for more even when you're full. The balance that makes your brain say yes before your body can say enough. You won't find that ratio in an apple or a piece of salmon. It doesn't exist in nature. It's created specifically to override your built-in satiety system, the internal mechanism that tells you when to stop eating. And it works. In the 1960s, about 13% of Americans were obese. Today, it's over 42%. Type 2 diabetes, once almost unheard of in children, is now diagnosed in teenagers every day. Heart disease, fatty liver, metabolic syndrome, all rising in step with the consumption of ultra-processed food. The average American diet is now more than half factory-made. 50 to 60% of what we eat doesn't come from farms. It comes from labs and assembly lines. And those labs? They tested the system on rats first. The results were disturbing. When researchers gave rats ultra-processed food, they gained weight, developed diabetes, became anxious and lethargic. But here's the part that should terrify you. When scientists try to switch them back to normal food, the rats refused to eat. They chose starvation over withdrawal. The researchers called it food addiction. The industry called it consumer loyalty. And when your body runs on engineered fuel, your mind pays the price. Chronic fatigue, brain fog, mood swings, difficulty concentrating. These aren't random symptoms. They're the predictable outcomes of a system that keeps your body spiking and crashing, inflamed and exhausted. When your fuel source is engineered for addiction, your mind suffers too. Focus fades, energy drops, motivation disappears. You're not lazy, you're not undisciplined, you're being targeted by billion-dollar food science designed to keep you in the loop. Crave, consume, crash, repeat. The cycle is profitable. For food corporations, repeat customers mean success. For pharmaceutical companies, chronically ill patients are the business model. And the result? A population that's tired, medicated, and distracted, living in a constant state of mental noise and physical imbalance. Which raises a darker question. What happens when an entire society is powered by this kind of fuel? When a generation grows up under constant sugar spikes and dopamine hits? What happens to critical thinking, to attention span, to the ability to recognize manipulation when it's happening in real time? Because history shows something simple. A sick, tired, distracted population is easier to control than a healthy, alert one. That's not a conspiracy, that's just physics. But here's what they didn't account for. The system is starting to crack, and it's not cracking from the top down. You don't need to wait for the FDA to act. You don't need new laws or corporate reform to start protecting yourself. The shift is already happening, and it's not coming from Washington. When Europe banned titanium dioxide, public outrage forced Mars to remove it from American Skittles. Not because regulators demanded it, but because consumers made it too risky not to. The company could reformulate at any time. They just needed a reason that hurt their bottom line. And once Mars moved, others followed, reformulating products, cleaning ingredients lists, removing additives that have been perfectly safe for decades. Not out of virtue, but because awareness spread faster than they could contain it. Social media accelerated everything. Parents started sharing what worked for their kids. Health advocates began decoding ingredient labels in real time. Whistleblowers exposed corporate practices from the inside. Information now moves faster than billion-dollar PR campaigns. Communities are teaching each other what corporations tried to hide. The knowledge is decentralizing, and it's working. And the results aren't subtle. When people make the switch, the transformation happens faster than anyone expected. People switching from ultra-processed diets to whole foods report the same pattern over and over. Energy returns, brain fog lifts, chronic inflammation drops, sleep improves, focus sharpens. Not because of miracle supplements or expensive programs, but because they stopped poisoning themselves with engineered food-like products and started eating actual food. One woman described it like waking up from a fog she didn't even know she was in. A man said he finally got his focus back after years of feeling mentally sluggish. Parents watch their children's behavior transform within weeks. These aren't flukes, they're patterns. Your body knows what to do with real food. It's designed for it. What it struggles with is chemical cocktail pretending to be nutrition. The system won't reform from the top down. Regulatory capture runs too deep, profits are too high, influence is too entrenched. But change doesn't need permission from the top. It starts with one person reading a label, then teaching their family, then sharing with friends. It spreads person to person, choice by choice, meal by meal, until the market itself shifts. You have more power than you've been led to believe. Every purchase is a vote. Every meal is a decision. Every conversation plants a seed. And when enough people plant those seeds, the landscape changes. But here's what most people don't see. The same pattern playing out in food is playing out in healthcare, technology, education, every system designed to keep you dependent. So the real question isn't just about what you eat, it's about what you're willing to see. Let's take a step back for a moment and look at the pattern. A nation built on convenience has become a nation in decline. America spends more on healthcare than any other developed country, yet our outcomes rank below dozens of them. Higher rates of obesity, higher rates of diabetes, higher rates of heart disease and certain cancers. The wealthiest nation on earth is also one of the sickest. And the trajectory isn't improving, it's accelerating. Now we're told the next frontier is innovation. Lab-grown meat positioned as the future of protein. Insect-based foods marketed as sustainable alternatives. Synthetic ingredients replacing natural ones in the name of efficiency and scale. Each new innovation promises progress, but everyone comes with the same price tag: greater dependency, more centralized control over what people eat and where it comes from. The message is constant: trust the system, trust the science, trust the corporations and regulators working together for your benefit. But trust requires evidence, and the evidence points the other way. Because when a population becomes chronically sick, perpetually tired and dependent on medication just to function, something deeper happens. Critical thinking weakens, attention spans shrink, the ability to recognize manipulation in real time fades. Civic engagement drops, political participation becomes performative. People grow too exhausted to question the structures guiding their lives. This isn't theory, it's visible reality. In fact, there's one statistic that proves we've crossed a line. For the first time in over a century, American children are expected to live shorter lives than their parents. Not because of war, not because of famine, because of what we eat. In the richest nation on earth. And it leads to uncomfortable questions. What happens to a democracy when its citizens no longer have the energy to participate? What happens to innovation when a generation grows up in a fog of processed food and pharmaceutical dependency? What happens to freedom when people are too sick to fight for it? Some see this as simple corporate greed, a profit-driven machine indifferent to human cost. Others sense something more deliberate, a pattern too consistent to dismiss, a trajectory too convenient for those who profit from dependency. A struggle not just for profit, but for power over bodies, minds, and futures. You'll have to decide which interpretation fits the evidence. Our task here has been to show you the facts, because whether you call it corruption, negligence, or control, the outcome is the same. A system that thrives when people are weak and profits when they stay that way. The antidote isn't fear, it's awareness, agency, and action. Read the labels, question the narrative, make choices that reclaim your health and your attention. The facts are documented. The crisis is undeniable. What happens next is up to you. But maybe there's one last question we haven't asked. If this system feeds on sickness, who or what feeds the system? Because the deeper you look, the clearer the pattern becomes. Every industry that profits from weakness seems connected. Every path toward progress seems to end in dependency. And every time the public wakes up, something new arrives to distract, pacify, or numb. Is that just a coincidence or design? Maybe the real battle isn't happening in boardrooms or laboratories at all. Maybe it's happening in something far more personal, right inside the human heart. Because the fight for your body might just be the opening move in a much larger war. The war for your soul.